Hello, this is Mark from tradinginform.com and welcome to this video on how to create an expert advisor for a SuperTrend trading strategy, version 2. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how you can take this strategy, or indeed any strategy, put it into an EA and then apply that to your MetaTrader 4 terminal to develop and optimize a trading strategy. Now, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact there is more information below this video, in particular the fact that this EA is available as a totally free download. All you need to do is click the link, go to tradinginform.com, sign up to the free newsletter, and you will receive an email with the download link for this very EA. Also, please note that this is a version 2. The reason it's a version 2 is it is an update version to the previous video, which looked at a very similar version of this EA. The reason why it is requiring an update is because MetaTrader have updated the MQL4 software, and it seemed a good time to update the EA and the video to reflect this. Also, please note there is a subscribe button below this video, and if you'd like more information and more videos like this, just hit that and you will be notified whenever there is a new video. Okay, so on to the actual EA. I'm going to look at it from the top and I'm going to go from top to bottom. Please note this is not a highly technical video at all. I'm looking to make this as accessible and easy to understand as possible. So the first thing that I'd like to draw your attention to is we've got this thing here called define magic MA, and this is a number that is specific to this EA. It's a good idea to use a different number, of course, to use a different number for each EA so that it can identify the specific trades that have been opened by this EA. Okay, the next section that I have called here inputs. Now, these are all, you'll note the fact that it says extern. It uses this word extern before each of them. Now, external inputs are useful to us because we can access these directly from the terminal. So anything we put in here, we can, in theory, in practice, change, and we can, in theory, optimize to make the best numbers that we can. So we've got here some fairly obvious ones. Percentage per trade. This refers to the percentage at risk per trade based on whether or not there is a stop loss, but it is based on the length, the amount of the stop loss. So here we've got it set to a risk of 1%. Okay, now we are going to look at whether or not we even have a stop loss. We can put this as true and false, and we've set it to a value of 1. Now, what this refers to, this is common to, if you've seen any of my previous videos, you will know that I like to use the average true range to set stop losses, profit targets, trailing stops, and things like that. So this is set very simply to 1 times the average true range. Okay, the next one's quite easy to understand as well. Use a profit target. And if so, it's set at a value of 5. Trailing stop, very simple. SuperTrend multiplier. If you're familiar with the SuperTrend indicator, you will know that it has a multiplier value. I'm not going to discuss what this value actually refers to, but you can, if you increase it, the SuperTrend becomes less sensitive to small changes in trend. If you decrease this value, it becomes more sensitive. Okay, we've got a thing here, we've got the EMA and an SMA length, quite straightforward. We've also got a start and a finish time. Again, pretty straightforward. We might want to restrict the hours that our EA can operate, and this is a way that we can do that. So we've got a start time set 2 AM, finish time at the moment set for 21, which of course is 9 PM. Okay, so we've got nothing here in our initialization function. This is for anything you want to happen when the expert is first applied to the chart, but we're not asking it to do anything in particular here. Now, I said I'm going to go through it in order, but I am actually going to skip right to the bottom. This EA is based on the template provided by MetaTrader, and it's quite a neat little way of doing it, but if you're not used to it, it just takes a little bit of thinking about. Now I'm going to go all the way to the end. If you're used to the way MetaTrader used to do it, or in fact you've never looked at an expert advisor in your life, this is the key thing for an EA. On tick. You might be able to realize what this is doing. It is basically every time we have a tick, every time we have a new piece of price information, this function will run. Okay, and all it's doing is basically checking whether or not we have any open orders at all. If we don't, we're only allowing one trade in either direction at one time. So we want it basically to check if we have any orders at all. If we have 0 orders, then we can check to open a trade. Okay, nice and simple. And if we have anything else, if we have one long order or one short order, we can check for closing. Okay, so every time we have a tick, every single time any new price data comes in, this is going to run and it's going to check whether or not we should be looking to open a trade or to close a trade. Okay, now I'm going to scroll back up to where we were before. Right, next thing that we want to have a look at here, it's not important to understand this. This piece of code here came directly from the template. It's not important to understand exactly how it works, but all it is doing is checking how many buy or sell orders that we have. So if we have 1, 2, 10 open long trades, however many short trades, this function here will tell us how many it is, and it will return that information. Lot size. Okay, now this is something that I've put in here. This is because I like to calculate the size of each trade based on the amount of capital I want to risk. I don't want to put a set number of lots because things happen, volatile markets happen, prices change significantly. I think it's a nice way to set the amount of capital at risk based on how much capital we have. So this is what it is calculating. It says here it's calculating the lots per trade, and it calculates this thing here called lot size. And it's basically doing exactly what I said at the start. If we want to risk 1% or 2% or 5% of our capital, this will calculate how many lots that corresponds to. Again, not too complicated. Right, here we're getting into it. We're looking at the buy and in fact the sell conditions as well. We're looking at this function, check for open. Now this is checking whether or not we should open either a long or a short trade. Now the first thing we have here are variables. We've got here at the top long stop loss. Most of them are pretty explanatory. Our long stop loss level, our long take profit level, our short stop loss level, and our short take profit level. All of these explain exactly what they are. Every time we open a new trade, we may have a stop loss level, we may have a profit target level, and it's going to be different for each trade that we open. So these variables are going to have the information for each trade. We've got a few things here that are still pretty easy to understand. We've got a SuperTrend, ST1 and 2, SMA stands for simple moving average, 1 and 2, and close, which stands for close price. And finally we have the ATR, average true range. Now the SuperTrend 1 and 2, etc., all correspond to the most recently closed bar. ST1 is the most recently closed finished bar of the SuperTrend, and ST2 is the bar before that. This particular EA is designed only to work with completed bar of information. So only when we have a confirmed change of trend can we possibly open a position. And we have a few other things that we can come to when we get to them. Order, res and hour. Okay, so we've got another thing here that comes directly from the MetaTrader template. If volume 0 is greater than 1, return. We're basically saying we only want a trade to open at the very start of each bar. So the volume is 0, so no trades have happened, but a new bar exists. That's the time that we want to proceed. Right, the next thing is highly changeable information. We've got technical indicators. Now I'm going to show you the ones that I've got in here. We have the SuperTrend 1 and 2 that I've already described. Now we're using for the SuperTrend a little bit different. We're using what they call iCustom, which is basically a custom indicator, and this information is telling the EA about that indicator. So it goes for 20 periods. It's called SuperTrend. It goes for 20 periods. It's got a variable multiplier and so on. Current period and previous period to that. So we've got some information about it. The SMA1, we're using here a standard function. So IMA will always give you a moving average. We can change different things about this, but this is based on a standard template. You can easily find these. We can just look up MQL4 technical indicators. It's going to be the top. So here we go. This is the one that we're just looking at, IMA, moving averages. Now this is exactly what I've just demonstrated there. We can see all the different parameters, the symbol, time frame, the period, whether it has a shift, which type of moving average it is, whether or not it's a simple or an exponential moving average, which price we want to apply to it, whether we're going to use the closing price or the opening or the high price, and shift, whether or not we want to use the current period or the previous period or the moving average 10 periods ago. All that information we can enter here. And that's exactly what I've done here. Now the close again is a standard one. I close 1 period ago and 2 periods ago. And finally ATR is the average true range here. And the hour refers to the hour. This is what I was saying previously, that we want to have the ability to control when our EA, what time of day our EA is opening and closing positions. So these technical indicators, you can very, very easily change them once you've got the template. Once you've gone online, you've looked up the information, so you want to stick in a stochastic, very popular indicator here. You can just take out the template. You can see which each one means. Each of these parameters means you can just take out the template and copy it directly into the expert advisor. Okay, so order equals 0. This is basically telling it that before we go through this checking process, we have 0 orders. Now this here is our trading logic. Our trading logic. Okay, so first of all, we're going to check for if the hour is greater than or equal to the start time. Also, we want to check for if the hour is less than the finish time. And these double ampersand refers to and. So each of these must be true before we can proceed to the end. So the close has to be greater than the SuperTrend. That makes sense. We're looking for the SuperTrend to go long, so the close has to be greater than it. Equally, the previous close has to be lower. The previous close has to be lower than the previous SuperTrend. This tells us that we've had a crossover. It's no good just finding out when the close price is higher than the SuperTrend if you're looking for when the close has crossed above the SuperTrend, and that's what we're checking here. And finally, we're checking that the close is greater than the simple moving average. Now we've got two different ways of opening this particular strategy that I have identified here. The first of these is when we have a close across above the SuperTrend and we're already above the simple moving average. Now we have another way to control the opening trade, and this is when the price crosses above the simple moving average and also the price is at that time below the SuperTrend. Now for the short trades, we've got exactly the same conditions but in reverse. So in this case, we simply just reverse the direction of the greater thans and less thans. So the next thing we come across is our trade entry logic. Now again, most of this is just taken directly from the template. But what we're looking at is if the order is indicating that we have a long trade, so our conditions for entry have been met. We first of all check whether or not we need to use a stop loss or a profit target, and then we use the command, the function order send, to send the buy order. Exactly the same is done for a short trade. So we have the order is a short trade. So our short trade conditions have been met. We do the same thing, calculate whether we have a stop loss, profit target, and if so, at what value, what level, and we enter a short trade. Now, the next thing we have to have a look for is this check for close. And if I can just scroll back down to the end again, we can see how this all fits in. We can see that we've got check for open. That's the one we've just looked at. That is whether or not we want to open a buy trade. Check for close, whether or not we want to close a trade. So we've got here again, we have the same thing. We have the variables exactly the same as before, ST1, SMA1, close 1, and ATR. And here we have our code to check whether or not we need to close the position. First of these, this 4 is just checking whether or not we have any positions. Then we go through, I've mentioned this before, magic MA. This is the magic number. This is what they call the magic number, and it's basically a number that is specific just to this EA. So always set it to a different one, particularly, of course, if you're running a live trading situation. Now, our conditions for closing a buy trade: we're closing if the close is below the SuperTrend, the previous close is above. So in other words, we have a close, a crossover from above to below the SuperTrend, signifying that the market is going down. We've got a little bit of other code here, and this is whether or not we're using a trailing stop. So if we do have a trailing stop, we work it out again using the ATR, again using a multiplier of the ATR, and it checks whether or not we need to modify the stop loss, and if so, at what level we modify it to. And that is what's going on in this code here. We use the function order modify to change the open position and add a stop loss. Right, the next one is if we have an existing sell order in the market. So if order type is op sell, this is checking whether or not we have a sell order in the market, and we have to think about whether or not it should be closed. And we're using exactly the same conditions in reverse here. This time we're looking if the close has crossed above the SuperTrend. And if it does, then quite simply we use order close and we close the position. And finally, once again, if we have a short trade, we may also have a trailing stop. We have the code here, the order modify, which will automatically change our trailing stop to the correct level. So there we have it. We're back to the onTick function. Now this is a fairly simple way of going through an EA, but really to do the basics, particularly for testing purposes, and this is not an EA that has been set up for live trading. If you're going to do it for live trading, you need to do a lot of testing and be very certain what you're doing. But if you're testing, you have obviously a bit more flexibility. You can amend this EA to do a wide range of different tests and different strategies. So I hope you found this useful. If you did so, please hit the subscribe button, please hit the like button. If you would like more information about trading the financial markets, about technical indicators, back testing, please go to www.tradinformed.com.